So my name is Kim Weeks, and I had this idea for Lineages about 6 or 7 months ago, and was so delighted for Yoga Alliance to join me and 7 at the moment heads or presumptive heads of the main modern yoga lineages in the world. And that's the idea, the overarching thing that we're doing monthly between now and the end of the year. So June, we began, and we will end in December 2021. Every single month, I'll have a conversation with a renowned head like Gary Kraftsow, who I'm just so delighted to host today. This workshop does have CE credits. We'll tell you in the chat where those go, I think to philosophy, or I'm not exactly sure, but I'm sure this can be applied to many things. You've seen the poll. And if you'd like to know more about the Lineages project that we have going on, do feel free to please email me at kim@weekswell.com. That's my mindfulness and consulting company, or email Yoga Alliance. We love to talk about this. This is my favorite conversation, and we're hoping to hear from you. So please feel free to let us know what you think about this, what you'd like to say about it, how you'd like to share it with us. You'll see these recordings, and now we get into the housekeeping of the event, and momentarily we'll be hearing from Gary. This is an hour-long presentation in which Gary and I will be talking for about 45 minutes, and then I will be moderating your questions. And so please feel free throughout the entire presentation conversation. If you'd like to chat in the Q&A box, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to say hello. I know I'm seeing a lot of people that I've been working with at Yoga Alliance, and we're just so delighted to talk to you and hear what you think about this and what you'd like to know more from Gary. So there is an upvoting feature on the Q&A box. If you take a look at it, you'll see that you can like a question. I have to be honest and say that I love it, but I also love really listening deeply to my guests. And so I'll be looking for sure, and you make my job a lot easier if you upvote a question, but it's also likely that I'll find it. And I just wanted to notate, I guess, the thing about yoga, which is to be really deeply listening. So if you find that that's distracting, please don't even worry about it. But if you find it's a helpful feature, we would love to see upvoted questions. And so what I'm doing now is introducing Gary Kraftsow, the founder and director of the American Viniyoga Institute, who has been an innovator in yoga for 40 plus years, probably since before he was born, because I'm sure this is a karmic experience for him. Gary, how are you? Good morning. Good afternoon, I think actually. It's morning for you.
It is just before, it's 11 a.m. for me. I'm on the West Coast of the United States. And thank you, Kim. It's an honor to be here, and greetings, everybody. It's an honor to have this opportunity to connect with you.
Yeah, we're so glad to hear from you. I'm actually calling in not normally from Washington, D.C., but actually from the native land acknowledgement I'd like to give in Kentucky, which is Cherokee, Shawnee, Osage. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I've got a link that I'd love to share with you. So Gary needs very little introduction for many people on the call, although if you don't know much about Viniyoga, I'm so happy to introduce a man who has loomed so large in my studies since I began teaching yoga 20 years ago. Even before I became a yoga teacher, I knew about Viniyoga. I knew about Krishnamacharya, whom you'll hear more about, and his son Desikachar, who directly taught Gary, starting as early, I think it was 1974, right? That's when you went to India?
That's
amazing.
when I first met them.
Yeah, so I just want to say, we're hearing I don't even know, over 40 years of experience that Gary's going to be talking about after having hatched this, idea and felt it internally. Gary, that was one of the things I loved most in our prep call, hearing how deeply embodied the realization and transformation was for you. And so I'd like to first just get us started, because I will say, since I'm working with other heads and with Yoga Alliance, and we're working so hard to let everybody know what each lineage is about, as part of this overarching conversation. And as I told you before we started the call, I love the one sentence that you have that describes Viniyoga, which is, and I just want to make sure I get it correct, emphasizes a comprehensive and authentic transmission of yoga designed for everyone's unique body and mind. So I wondered if you could just give me a couple more sentences to describe to us the essence of Viniyoga and what we can learn, expect in this call, what it is.
Wow, what a big kind of question. The context is that this teaching lineage that was passed in our century or last century through Krishnamacharya really dates back to his ancestor from 7th century or 9th century, Nathamuni, and the whole context of these yoga teachings is about Dharma, how each of us fulfill our responsibilities to ourselves, to each other, and to the universe, to the earth, to the galaxy, I guess, that's beyond, and then also to the divine. And so the Viniyoga teaching is to help each individual find their own true Svadharma, what's important for them. We all have different needs and interests, but we're all, in the Vedic perspective, in the Viniyoga teaching, we're multidimensional. So we have a functional anatomy, we have our physiology, we have our changing emotional states, we have our self-concept and our ideas about ourselves and the world around us, and we set a direction for our future. We make choices, we act and behave in the world. And we can do all of those things in a way that increases our balance and our harmony and our peacefulness, and create structural integrity and sympathetic parasympathetic regulation, and love and compassion and tolerance and clarity, or we can mess up. And so the Viniyoga, the teaching is to help individuals find out who they are at a multidimensional level, and then depending upon their needs and interests, adapt among the broad spectrum of yoga tools that are available to help them find structural integrity, create sympathetic parasympathetic balance, sleep better, have more vitality and energy, stimulate their immune function, find forgiveness, find peace, be clear about where they're headed in this life. It's broad, but it really depends upon where the individual is at, what they're interested in, what they're ready for.
And that's where I want to pick up what you're saying, because there's a couple things. There are just some phrases. First is Dharma, second is Svadharma, and the third is Vedic. So I think there are people on the call who so what I hear when I hear Dharma, I thought you described it beautifully. Like, of course, it's like technically or very perfunctorily like translated as duty, but as you described, it's many more things than that. And Svadharma is an intrapersonal truth about living in all of these positive ways that you just described. Not just right now, but also relative to where you're headed. It sounds like what I heard you say. Would that?
Oh, yes. I mean,
well enough?
Yeah, I mean, in a very simple way, it's like we're born and we are given certain gifts, but we also have certain responsibilities. We need to take care of ourselves, and ourselves is multidimensional. I'm 66 and I met my teachers in India at 19 years old. And this yoga science has enabled me to live in this physical body with relatively few issues, because I take care of myself using the tools of yoga, not only my structure, but my physiology and my emotions and my mind. And hopefully I've made some good choices in my life. Of course, I grow my errors. So it's not only myself, but I have responsibilities for my community, my family, my society, my community. And the teaching in yoga, by the way, for oneself is primarily tapas, disciplines that we do to take care of ourselves at a multidimensional level. And then in society, it's dana. This is called tree karma. Dana means that charitable, generous disposition. So we serve our communities, our families, our society.
Dana is D-A-N-A? D-H-A-N-A.
D-A-N-A, but that first day is long. So it's dana. It means giving. And then the third is yajna, which means worship or devotion, but it also just means how we fulfill our responsibilities to the whole, the greater universe, and to the divine.
So, and yoga,
well, just the last thing I would say is that each of us have a different calling. Some of us want to teach asana to kids. Some of us want to help seniors with asana. Some of us want to go into the prisons or into the psychiatric ward. So we all have some Svadharma, some of us want to get out there into society and be, the word I think I heard in the 1-minute video is social activism.
Yeah.
So that isn't everybody's calling, but if that's your calling, and somebody wants to go into the mountain and meditate, or into the church or synagogue or temple and pray. So the teaching is that we all have our own unique Svadharma to fulfill.
Yeah.
And in this tradition, we're taught the full spectrum of practices, not only about internal disciplines of yoga practice, but also the yoga teachings about working with society and about praying and fulfilling responsibilities to the greater whole. And then the role of a teacher is to help the individual find their own path and then adapt and calibrate the tools of practice to support them on their own life journey, which is from birth until end of life, at least that we know in this lifetime. My teacher, when I was 19, told me very clearly, now that's because of who I was, I came to Madras, now Chennai, in 1974 as a student of religion. So my teacher told me that if you want to know the real purpose of yoga is preparation for the moment of death.
Yeah.
Now, just to be clear, some of my colleagues back then were engineers or even activists. They didn't get that teaching. These teachers would see who they were working with and adapt the teachings so that they serve the interests and needs of the individual and met them where they were at.
All right. No, wait, I want to ask just a quick clarification before we jump into describe, like, imagine I just landed from Mars. Although that, I realize that's actually a bad example because you'd have to describe a lot of things. You'd have to like alter the universe, somebody call Elon Musk, and then we can figure out how to reverse engineer what it's like to land from Mars. So anyway, never mind. I want to say, like, if I walked in off the street and I knew a little bit about yoga, but somebody had told me to go to an American Viniyoga class, what does it look like? I want to ask that, but before we go to that, I want to ask a really quick question, which is, I forgot my shoot. I'll remember when I come back. It was something about this. You were talking about engineers. You're talking about having been at Colgate and how these engineers you just referenced, are you talking about engineers who later become yoga teachers, or you're talking about engineers who go on and live a life that it does not necessarily involve yoga?
It's a much simpler answer. When I was in Madras in the early 70s, early and mid 70s, some of my colleagues, they were a little bit older than me, were Indians who were studying at IIT, Indian Institute of Technology. And there was a biomedical research group. And so they were being taught yoga, and particularly the asana aspects of yoga, from a more engineering perspective. So understanding how to adapt postures to access the structure in different ways, and understanding how to sequence postures in different orders to create different structural effects, which we then can use in order to help people who are having therapeutic need. So that kind of engineer. And, Krishnamacharya was an extraordinary man. He was a deep scholar who had vast knowledge of the Vedic tradition. But he was a deep practitioner and meditator. And then his son Deskatar, who was my main teacher, I had contact with Krishnamacharya, but Deskatar was the main teacher that I worked with, had Western education as a construction engineer. So they took these engineering principles and applied them to Krishnamacharya's teachings. So it's like they were technicians. In addition to being great mystics and yogis, they were technicians of the human body. So, there are great swamis that have brought some of the deeper philosophical teachings from Vedic India to the West. Krishnamacharya was also like that, but he was also a technician in a way that many of the great swamis were not. He was a technician of asana and a technician of pranayama, and even a technician of how to adapt chanting and meditation to meet the needs of the individual.
Okay, I am so glad I asked that question and would love to send an emoji brain blowing into the chat, just because so you're saying you were there with them studying, and they influenced your thinking, obviously, because you were coming at age 19 from X and they were coming from Y, and you got together as like one of the world's first teacher training classes and had some cross fertilization. Is that true? Is that what you just said?
I mean, I was a religious studies student back in 1974 and had already initiated a little bit of Sanskrit studies. And then I arrived in Madras and I was taking coursework at Madras University with a scholar mystic named V.A. Devasenapati. That's another story, but he was a Shaivite Siddhanta, which is a different tradition than Krishnamacharya's, but he was a mystic and a scholar. So I was studying with him, and then I was studying with Krishnamacharya and well, primarily with Desikachar, but under the auspices of Krishnamacharya.
Okay.
And so Krishnamacharya was this great yogi, but many of his students were engineers, and I was a religious studies student. So we kind of had this sort of mixing pot, and Krishnamacharya said it's about everything.
Yeah,
it's about everything, and there's a science for everybody. But you asked that question about coming from Mars. Look, every two-legged, in all respects to the Native Americans, the two-leggeds and the four-leggeds, every two-legged human being has a lumbosacral spine. And 90+% of people experience low back pain and sacrum issues. We all have a thoraco-cervical relationship intersected with our shoulder girdle. And many of us have chronic low back sacrum issues, neck and shoulder tension. Many of us have sleep issues. Many of us have fatigue combined with sleep issues, or we all have experienced stress. And then some of that turns into anxiety. And then because of loss and disappointment, we have sadness and depression. And some of us even have anger issues. Of course, all of us do. So the reality is within an individual Svadharma, the path may be different, but every single one of us should learn to stabilize our low back, release tension in our neck and shoulders, balance our sympathetic parasympathetic dysregulation so that we sleep better and have more energy, stabilize our emotions and clarify our minds so that we can make better choices for ourselves going forward. So although the whole teaching of Krishnamacharya was adapt to the individual, there's some things that all human beings suffer from, and that a good yoga teacher should be able to address all of those issues, helping somebody stabilize their low back, helping somebody release tension in their neck and shoulders. I've had students who ask me, well, how do you teach a group? I said, look, no matter who you're working with, basically almost every single person who comes into the room will benefit from strengthening their low back. Almost everybody who comes into the room will benefit from releasing tension in their neck and shoulders. And it may be that all you do is that, and you'll serve them. Most of them are going to have sleep issues and energy issues. So if you understand how you can work with breath in asana, what we call breath-centric asana, and how to adapt the breathing in pranayama to, if someone has sympathetic suppression, to activate sympathetic activation. If somebody has sympathetic agitation, how to sedate. So how to stimulate and sedate. So these are tools that are relevant for everybody. If you're doing, groups or individuals, once you learn these tools, you can help anybody no matter who they are and what their life orientation is.
Well, and you're helping me. I appreciate, thank you for continuing with the Mars, analogy, but I also, it feels to me like you are describing a common Viniyoga class very well in terms of its substance and the way the teacher approaches the student, and that it's rooted, many sort of waves out from you being the center, but that your teachers you are training people to look at every student in these ways that you just described. So one question I have, because it came up and I want to make sure we don't leave it, is the difference once again between Dharma and Svadharma. I think you talked about Dharma being universal, Svadharma being interpersonal duty, but let's clarify that and then talk about the a little bit less substance Viniyoga class and more like logistical, like where do I go, who do I call, and is it a class of people, is it just one-on-one, like how does it work?
And we don't usually bring goats into our class, although it's cute and it may be,
that was my next question,
attractive, for some people. No, look, so the whole yoga tradition emerged in the context of Vedic teachings in the framework of what the ancients called Sanatana Dharma, which are universal kind of codes of conduct and norms of behavior that the ancients established in order to manage our individual self-interest and need, which is Svadharma, within the context of the society, and within the context of the planet Earth, and within the context of this greater universe. And, so there is the universal Dharma, like you can say simply, all beings want to be happy and have causes of happiness. This is actually a Buddhist phrase, but it's totally consistent with the Vedic teachings. All beings want to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So that's a broader understanding of Dharma. And then specific dharmas are the teachings through which you can achieve that happiness, fulfillment, reduce or eliminate suffering, and find meaning and purpose in life. That's a broader understanding of Dharma. And then, as I said, individuals have Dharma with respect to their own physical being. Individuals have Dharma with respect to their family and society. Individuals have Dharma with respect to the planet Earth and with respect to the dimensions of the divine. That's a little subtler discussion. So Swadharma is Dharma, but how it manifests for each individual. Like you have to walk your own path. You can have a teacher and acharya point you in the direction, but until you walk it, your Dharma is to do the walk. So that's your Swadharma, how it manifests for you.
Your walk, basically. Like, okay, great.
They say in yoga that yoga is Sva Tantra. It means you have to do it for yourself. It means you have to do the walk yourself.
Yeah, oh God, I want to go deep dive down the conversation of Guru with you, but let's pause there and let's talk about, tell me about a typical American Viniyoga class, which I already know the answer, but I had to ask.
We have that joke in Viniyoga. How many Viniyogis or yoginis does it take to change a light bulb? It depends. And so
That's awesome.
The classes depend upon the interest of the capability. Not every teacher has interest or capability in this broad dimension of what yoga really has to offer. So the teacher has to sort of set up their class, and then the students may or may not be interested in this broad dimension. So if you're doing primarily an asana class, for a Viniyoga asana class, the starting point for us is understanding the relationship between the flow of the breath and the movement of the spine. We don't really do form-centric asana. We do what I call breath-centric asana. So the movement is guided by the conscious control of inhale and exhale. So an asana practice in Viniyoga, it'll change in the morning than the evening, because most of us wake up in the morning and we have different needs than the end of the day in the evening. So morning class, the asanas and the sequence of asanas will be different in the morning and the evening, as an example, but they'll all be focused on the relationship between your awareness through attention to your breath. I use attention at sort of like we channel our awareness through attention to the breath. And then as the breath moves, the spine moves. And the asanas are an extension of the effect of the breath on the spine. So for us, breath-centric asana with a focus on the movement of the spine is the core of an asana practice. And then if it's a morning class, maybe we'll spend more time working to stabilize the low back and then to lift and wake up the energy. If it's an afternoon or evening class, we may take more time to release tension in the neck and shoulders, make sure the low back is fine, and then kind of calm and relax the energy. So getting ready for an evening. So it'll be a typical Viniyoga class that's just asana-centric. Will be focused on awareness, breath, and movement, and adapted depending upon the time of day to serve the needs of the students.
Okay.
Well, we may have a Viniyoga class that's a combination of asana and pranayama. And so then we'll adapt the breath in the asana, and we're not doing asanas for structure primarily if it's a pranayama class. We'll use the asanas to prepare the breath for the specific pranayamas that we'll be practicing.
Right.
And then just two more steps in. If we're doing a meditation class, then we'll use breath-centric asana and pranayama to prepare the body to sit and the mind to be still so we can go deeper into the meditation. And for us in Viniyoga, we often use chanting to support meditation. So we'll take the chant into the breathing and asana. We'll actually use chanting in asana and then regulate the length of the breath by the mantras that we're using in our pranayama. And then that mantra gets deeper into our system, so then we can go deeper into our meditation.
Did you just say mantra you chant while doing asana? Did I hear you say that? Okay.
Correct.
And can I also clarify, just for the,
Sometimes,
and I do apologize. No, I know. I feel really bad that I interrupted, because I was just going to ask for clarification. So I apologize to the audience because I wanted to try to capture it. So is it fair to say that Viniyoga is a progressive practice in that Okay, we've talked about the individual over here and the needs and the Dharma and the Svadharma. So then once you get into the practice, and let's say I do have a question, if you have a max, do you just say like for you, do you say like, there's no way I can have more than 15 people in a class? I wonder. But you start with, so is it fair to say progressive asana, then you use the asana to prepare for pranayama. Then next in, as you said very well, asana pranayama to prepare for meditation. And then in the mantra, you sort of weave the mantra in based on what you, the teacher, see may be the needs of the students, including in asana.
It's not bad, Kim, but it's a little bit, look, I can teach certain students for years and it's only about asana. That's what they want. That's what they're interested in. That's fine. I try to encourage people to understand the power of the breath and the importance of pranayama. Mm-hmm. I used to joke and say, well, what's more important after all, your hamstrings or your liver? Now, please don't take this literally. It's just an intentional provocation. If what asana is to hamstrings is what pranayama is to liver. It's a simplification. But the idea is that asana has a large effect on the human structure.
Right.
Breath in asana and pranayama, breath adaptation in asana and pranayama have a big effect on the physiology. Also on the mind, but I'm just saying that. So I could work with somebody only on asana or on asana and pranayama, but there are a lot of people, this is a progression that may be interested to recognize yoga is not just about their low back or their autonomic nervous system. It's also about their changing emotions. And if a lot of people suffer from troubling emotional states, common, and so how to manage your emotions? Well, that's chanting and meditation are more potent. Pranayama will influence the emotions because there's a kind of an influence of pranayama on the in the limbic brain, on the hypothalamus. So anxiety creates sympathetic activation. Pranayama can help sedate it. But from the emotional, the feelings and the cognitive content that you spin out in, that's more about chanting and meditation. So with some people, we take them all the way into chanting and meditation. Yeah. And then, yes, we do weave not only mantra, of course, but also we use certain Vedic chants or even Italian chants or English chants because of the power of language. And we can weave the chanting, whether it's mantra or other chants, through the asana, take it into the pranayama. And by the time you get to meditation, it's so much more deeply into your system. It's what I call the heart mind, not just your thoughts, but also your feelings merge. And so for us, the most potent way of going deeper into meditation is to use the support of asana, pranayama, and chanting. We say, this is just poetic. And again, don't take it literally. We use the breath to prepare, we use the asana, in asana, we do asana, forgive me, here we go. We do asana to prepare the breath for pranayama. Right. We do pranayama to prepare the mind for meditation. We do meditation to prepare the heart for prayer so that we can unify with the totality or with God or whatever.
Yeah. It's so fascinating. I will say this is like, a sort of that sentence was with the clauses or what a dead ringer for what we would say in the Iyengar tradition. And I know you're going to have something to say about that. And I want to know, but I want, to tell everybody, Krishnamacharya is the man who taught both all Iyengar, Patabi Joyce, the founder of Ashtanga, and TKS Desikachar, who taught TKV Desikachar. I'm so sorry. Yes, so sorry. Okay. Who taught Gary. And so, I don't think it is an overstatement to say that the majority of yoga as exercise practiced in the United States and globally have, for the most part, flowed down through that stream in the last 100 or so years. And so it's just, so I can say, Iyengar is coming up in September and Ashtanga will be in November. But Gary, it's so interesting to listen to you describe the fluid way that it sounds like Viniyoga has with students. So it's like responding to the student rather than being this we're going to do it this way. This is Surya A, or this is like the way you do a first, Iyengar class or whatever, right? It feels very much more.
You know what we say about, and I'll make a broader comment. And then if you want me to say anything more specific about the different teachers, I can do that.
No, let's stay with Viniyoga.
That's better. what we say is that asanas have no value in their own.
Right.
The only value an asana has is the value it has to the practitioner when they're practicing it. It's not about the asana. Asana is just a tool that you use to begin to understand more deeply what's going on in your structure. And then we adapt the asana to suit the needs of the body. So it's not about the asana, it's about the practitioner. It's not about the technique of pranayama. The pranayama techniques are only to serve practitioners. So it's about your needs.
Right.
And even meditation is not about the meditation, or mantra is not about the mantra. They're all tools to serve practitioners. So the focus in Viniyoga is to understand the practitioner, help them understand their own needs and interests, help them learn how to use these tools to deepen their self-understanding, and then to adapt the tools and calibrate them so that they serve their needs and interests at a multidimensional level.
Yeah, I'd say we're at the like 2:34, which is like the 2-minute mark or whatever. And I really feel like for those watching, if you ever want to scroll back to like at least to me, the most potent, cogent description as we're flowing on this, that to me was the description of Viniyoga. That was beautiful. And so my question then, I almost want to ask, do you see the role of the American Viniyoga teacher as being one of like direct, like transmissive service to the student? Because that's what I just love about the description, like a comprehensive and authentic transmission, right? And so basically, can you talk about when, like the classes, when you started them, this is in 83 or whatever, because you called it something different, but this is what you're doing, to now, like, tell me how the classes have evolved in the context of whether I'm right or wrong about the teachers being in this like transmissive service to students in a comprehensive and authentic way.
All right. So look, and please, everyone, thank you for being here and listening. And I apologize if I'm talking too fast. By the way, it's a pattern of one of my samskaras.
We can rewind. That's the thing. We can rewind.
Right. But look, here's one thing that Desikachar used to always tell me: you can't give what you don't have. Mm. And so I'm going to just take a moment. I know this is, the teacher, one of the important things for the teacher is to realize that the teaching is for the student. It's not about or for the teacher, it's for the student. Mm. But let me use myself as an example. I arrived in Madras, I was 19. So I was already a student of religion and had been a gymnast in high school. So I thought I was wrong, but I thought I already understood asana. No big deal, asana. I didn't come for that. I came for Upanishads and Patanjali's teachings and meditation. But then my teacher taught me, asana and pranayama. So when I began teaching as a young man, and by the way, I was in track for PhD in religious studies. So my teacher used to say, "You're too young to study religion." And so you should study Western medicine. And in fact, I said, why? This was in the mid-70s. And he said, because you're going to be bringing yoga therapy into the United States in the future, which was clearly prophetic. But so when I first came back and started teaching, mostly I taught asana classes, and people started coming to me with structural problems. But then they started coming to me with other issues like digestive issues and cardiac issues. So I flew back to Madras, and they started teaching me how to work with physiology and yoga therapy. And then I came back, and in that process, by the way, and I don't want to make this about me, but I said I was just going to use me as an example. I met a woman and I ended up getting married. And that brought up a whole lot of emotion. And so then I went back and learned more about meditation. And so as I started working, initially my students came to me with back problems, then they were wanting me to help them sleep better or deal with some physiological condition. And then they started asking me about their relationships and their depression and their anxiety. I was young. I was 19. I began teaching in my early 20s. So my teaching evolved over now 45 years.
So this was happening, these conversations you were having about relationships. I really do want to amplify also this connection I hear you making between, the asanas not stop. I always say, like, they don't stop where they start. I mean, there's no real place for them. They just they are what they are. They inhabit you, you inhabit them. So it doesn't just stop there, but was this your 20s when people were coming and you were starting to see this connection? Okay, between
and I was struggling because I was a young man in my 20s, and I was living in Maui in Hawaii, and my friend David Williams, was beginning Ashtanga yoga on Maui. But I wasn't like, what they were doing wasn't the yoga that I learned in Madras. In fact, I went back one time and asked Eskachar about it, and he showed me the series and said, explain where they came from. That's another discussion I won't go into now. And so it took me a while to understand my own emotion in response to, this community. And so my point about all of this is it's a maturing process. And until I, matured as a human being, I was able to focus and offer people teachings that I understood, that I received, and that I understood from my own experience. I respected the lineage, the teaching I received, my own experience, and the people in front of me. And as I matured as an adult, as a yoga practitioner and human being, I was able to work at progressively deeper levels with students. And actually, one of the very last conversations I had with Eskachar in early 2000s was, he said, so I want to ask you, why are you holding back? And I said, what do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about. He said, well, you have spent your lifetime studying these inner teachings of yoga, the antaranga sadhana is the phrase he used, the inner teachings. Why aren't you sharing them? And I said, you said I was too young to study religion. He just laughed at me. He said, yeah, that was 40 years ago. Your Dharma now, Gary, from my teacher, was to share that he had told me before, share that yoga is not just asana, bring yoga therapy to the West. His last message to me was bring these deeper teachings forward, help people understand the depth and breadth of yoga. And he reminded me that, in preparation for the end of life. So it's really that long-winded discussion was just to say that it evolves for each individual, just like individual practice changes with the needs of the students. A teacher's own maturity evolves over time as long as they continue to study and practice. If they become self-satisfied because they learn some asana and they can do them well, then they stop growing as a yoga teacher. Don't assume you can make it up. There's so much depth in teachings from the tradition. Learn it, practice it, and as you mature over time, your teaching will deepen and expand, and you'll be able to touch people at progressively deeper levels.
Totally. And I'm really hoping that I'm going to say something a little provocative, but it's what I've always learned is that Krishnamacharya taught Pattabhi Jois first, he taught Iyengar second, he taught his son third. And you can see a maturation of approach to, can you? That's my question. It seems to me.
Let me clarify that's what I was going to say before, and about the teachers, not anything about them as individuals, just historical chronology.
Totally.
So of the three, Pattabhi Jois was the eldest. Mr. Iyengar was Krishnamacharya's wife, younger brother. So Krishnamacharya was 30 or approximately 30 years older than his wife. And Eskachar was his second son. Eskachar's mother's younger brother, much younger, was Mr. Iyengar. So they had a family connection. But Krishnamacharya was teaching in Mysore at the Maharaja's palace. The Maharaj was his patron. And at the Yogashala, a young Shaivite scholar named Pattabhi Jois came to study. Pattabhi Jois was older than Iyengar, so he started studying with Krishnamacharya. And Krishnamacharya had a style of teaching back then, and that's that Ashtanga series. Let's not go into that discussion. That's another discussion. So Pattabhi Jois studied that. Iyengar stayed with Krishnamacharya longer, and in the evolution of Krishnamacharya's teachings, he evolved props. And Iyengar took that and ran with it and became a master of asana. He's like the gold standard in the world of asana, Mr. Iyengar was. Eskachar was younger than them, but studied and stayed with his father until his father died. And Eskachar was in his early 50s. So Eskachar studied all of it. Some of those teachings that came, that I'm talking about now, were not traditionally taught until you reach the midday stage of life. That's a metaphor coming from Nathamuni. The sunrise stage of life
in Viniyoga, that's what you're saying.
Sunrise stage of life, midday. So sunrise stage of life is something like, let's say generally now, the first 30 years. It was really tied in India to the Saturn cycle because of Jyotish. So the first 27 or 28 years of life the orientation of practice is different. And then there's the midday stage of life, which is from 28 to 30, all the way into the, like I'm 66 at the tail. Maybe it'll go for another decade for me, maybe not, 5 years. And then there's the sunset stage of life. Well, so the idea is that teachings are more appropriate depending upon where you are in your life cycle, although it's not rigid. So a young person can get into meditation, and a senior can be working with improving their golf swing through adapted asana.
Right.
So it's really up to the individual. But when Krishnamacharya taught Iyengar, Tabi Joyce and Iyengar, they were young in their, I think towards the end of their work together, it was in their mid-20s. So they didn't learn all of the other things from, I'm not saying they didn't get
from
it.
him. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
They didn't study it with Krishnamacharya, the things that Deskachar studied that came as he got older.
That's another reason you say like direct and authentic transmission, right? Is that another like reason behind those two adjectives?
Well, direct means that I had a living relationship with Deskachar, and even Krishnamacharya said some things to me. I received specific teachings from him, but no mistake that Deskachar was the man that I work with on my regular sessions.
Yeah.
So that's a direct transmission. Authentic is that Krishnamacharya was not somebody who heard about yoga and figured it out. He is a lifetime practitioner whose family was a lifetime. His father was his teacher. Then he went, after his father died, longer story, he went up into Kailash and lived there for 7 years, where he met his guru, Ramana Mohan Brahmachari. So their generational transmission, uninterrupted transmission of authentic yogic teachings. And so we use the word authentic because it is clear. I mean, when I was in Madras in the 70s and 80s, there were yoga teachers that were sent from what are now famous schools in Lonavala and Kabalyadama. They sent yoga teachers up in the Bombay area where they were starting to use Western equipment to study yoga therapy. They would send their teachers to Madras to learn technique from Krishnamacharya. So Krishnamacharya was revered in India, not only as a great Vedic scholar, but mostly as a great yogi who understood the technologies of asana and pranayama and adapting chanting and meditation in ways that are fairly, in my experience, unique. Now, he didn't invent yoga.
Right. No.
But he was this great master who understood how to adapt it so that it meets the student where they are.
Yeah. And I'm seeing a chat. There's a bunch of things I want to say. I'm like, get them all. Number one, I hope everyone here comes back tomorrow for Gary's master class. I feel actually pretty strongly around the fact that these 7 classes, these master classes, you can take for free between the rest now and the rest of the year are such gifts. And so I hope you can come tomorrow at 2 p.m. Gary's going to have a model of a person showing, like demonstrating what a class looks like, demonstrating like how a woman, her name is Bernadette Solar, we've just met on Instagram, I'm so excited, who's going to be, demonstrating his class. So that's number one.
Can I say something quickly about that?
Please.
Just so that you know.
I have a lot of questions though, so
this will just take one moment. Just that class tomorrow will be in what we call an integrated practice that will weave chanting in asana, in pranayama, leading to meditation. So it'll be an integrated, not just an asana class, which I could do, but I chose to share an example of the breath. Remember, not every Viniyoga class is integrated. We can just do an asana class. And we're not only for sick people, we can do, we can work with athletes. I have in my lifetime worked with many.
It doesn't sound like you're worried. I haven't heard, I don't know, maybe people, to chat in on the Q&A, but I haven't heard anything related to.
All right. Well, they used to joke about Vini yoga is mini yoga, and we only work with old and weak and sick people, which is a misunderstanding. But let me just finish this comment, Kim, please.
Yeah.
So tomorrow's practice will be a woven together, integrated asana, pranayama, chanting, and meditation practice.
Great. I can't wait. I hope everybody can make it. Again, it's recorded. You can press rewind. But I did want to say that that's what I'm sort of hearing is that it really relies on the teacher to look to be in like with the students and to see what's going on and make these determinations to either, as you say, teach a yoga asana class or an integrated practice as you just described tomorrow's practice to be. And that's a question that somebody did ask. The most upvoted question we have is, what do you think that the asana practices that Krishnamacharya's students developed what do you think about them having been separated from the whole of yoga by some modern teachers and practitioners?
Well, look, I think that all of these individual techniques have their own very useful, valid, functional goals for human beings. So I can do asana just by itself, and I can do asana to prepare myself to sit for pranayama meditation, or I can do asana to help rehabilitate my back if I'm a golfer. And it's fine. It's up to the individual. So asana has its own valid goals, but it's most significantly useful for the human structure, anatomy. Pranayama can be done by itself, but you can go deeper into pranayama if you use breath adaptation in asana to prepare it, and your body's able to sit. But pranayama you can use pranayama just to help you sleep, or to help you if you're managing fatigue. And that's a valid goal. And so you know what I mean? So these individual practices it's totally fine to extract them from the whole of yoga, and they have valid functional reasons to do them. But the deeper work happens when they're woven together. So what I think about that separation is, it's sad that people don't learn the true tradition, which is the weaving together of all these practices, which isn't to say that they can still be getting fantastic work for their structure, by just doing asana. Mm-hmm. But at a certain point, what's happening is, at a certain point, we're going to age, grow old, and die. So what's the yoga that can help you when you're diagnosed maintain optimism and clarity and peace, or when you're at the end of life? And that's not going to teach, you're not going to teach the average 17-year-old that. I was interested in that when I was a kid, but not everybody is. And there's 80-year-olds who don't want to know about that. They just want you to help them improve their back.
Totally.
And that's all fine. It's all fine.
I think that again, now we're at the 50-minute mark, which is like the 48-minute mark of the actual. I think you should rewind, everyone. Because that's a good way of saying it. You were interested in all of this stuff at age 19, and people at 80 aren't at that point, and it's all good. And it's so good. So there was a question. Thank you, Trisha. I was going to say I felt like that question was answered. Somebody chatted in and said this wasn't upvoted, but it seems to mirror back to you. I think it might empower you to say something else awesome, which is Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And I think everybody on the call knows about Patanjali and knows about the Yoga Sutras. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole. I've been chatting once or twice during the session words that Gary has said that I think are completely worth Wikipediaing. Even when I was, sort of popping around the web today, finding on Wikipedia yoga as exercise as a really deep subheading heading on Wikipedia was fascinating. And I'm going to go back and read that. I think it's so interesting. But this person says Patanjali's Yoga Sutras has only one main sutra on asana, Shtiram Sukham Asanam, and the rest of the sutras focus on the mind. And yet we have this whole system of yoga being around asana. And the question is, any thoughts on that? But it seems to me that you've answered what your thoughts are.
The only thing I'll say, by the way, is that there are 3 sutras on asana, Shtiram Sukham Asanam. Right. Anyway. Yes. There are 3 sutras on asana, but yes, and that shows asana is an important part of a much more complex process. Right. Our structure is important. Our physiology, our liver is a little bit more important for our long-term well-being than our hamstrings. Yeah. And our mind and emotions is maybe a little bit more important than our physiology. It's all, you can focus wherever you want. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I apologize.
Anyway, the 3 sutras, by the way, Stira Sukhamasanam, Tato Dvanva Prayatna Shaitilya Ananta Samapatibhyam, Tato Dvanva Anabhigataha. Those are the 3 on asana. And there's 52 sutras times 4 chapters. Let's say there's 200 sutras. There's 3 on asana. Yeah. So that's a message to the community. And the first couple of sutras of Patanjali's work are defining yoga in relation to the transformation of the mind.
That's right. Right.
So that's clear.
And it seems to me, if I may, that you have really put a pin in the teaching of Viniyoga that is itself a yoga the relationship between the asana, pranayama, meditation, and mantram. So basically, like, Viniyoga teachers are necessarily actively practicing yoga and teaching yoga in that interstitial space, right?
Some are and some aren't.
Some are, well, that's your desire.
That's the reality is I train a teacher and help them focus on where their true interest lies. So there are those who really want to teach asana, and that's beautiful. And there are those that want to teach meditation, and that's different and beautiful. So what we want to do is train, like the GP, the general practitioner in medicine, we want to train comprehensively a yoga teacher, but then help them find their own calling, their own svadharma, even as teachers. We want to make sure they understand it all before we quote certify them. But then we want to support them in picking the demographic and the style of work that they want to do for themselves. There's not one right way. It's not cloning teachers. It's educating them and then encouraging them to create their own path.
Yeah, I mean, the question that did get upvoted, which was the question, I think a lot of people, especially if they are completely new to Viniyoga, if they have just come to this call and they've been, at yoga classes with playlists that have a lot of chaturangas in them, or some, lunges that low and high, and, like really modified Surya Namaskars, like kind of a thing. I think that the perspective of that person would be listening to all this and being like, whoa, like there's so much more to yoga. And I don't know, I was going to ask you earlier, do any Viniyoga classes have music?
I think that we have some graduates who bring music into their class. One reason is because they're teaching in an environment like at a gym where there's other noise and it's distracting. Our general principle is that you should be listening to the sound of your breath and focusing on the relationship between the flow of breath and the movement of your spine in asana. So if music supports that because it covers extraneous noise, it can be useful.
Yeah.
And we might have music before a class. If it's a morning class, the music could be more upbeat. If it's an evening class, the music can be more modified and calm. We recognize that sound has an effect on the human energy system, what we call Brahmana, Langana, and Samana, or the autonomic nervous system. So it's not that we're opposed to sound, but it should be in the service of what we're trying to accomplish in the class. And not only the music, but look, if I'm teaching a morning class, I might speak up like this. If I'm teaching an evening class, I'll lower my pitch, and not in a fake artificial way, but in a way that supports the long-term, the specific intention that we're trying to create in the class. So if music serves that, it's fine, but it can be a distraction for people really focusing on the details of, for example, the asana, if that's what the class is.
It just sounds so personalized. It sounds so personalized. And I love your answer about music, because I was curious about it, and I haven't seen any questions here, but I think it may answer some other, questions. So to become a Viniyoga teacher, then, so I guess your intention when you train teachers is to get them to practice this deeply in and out of the sort of
First thing is to help them develop. We help them develop for themselves. An asana practice calibrated to their structural needs. An asana and pranayama practice calibrated to their physiological needs. An asana, pranayama, and meditation practice calibrated to their changing emotional needs and their interests and orientation. So what we want to do is help them understand that, because you can't give what you don't have, and you can have it only through practice. So we train them sequentially in these different techniques. And after they practice for 6 months the asana, then we train them how to teach asana. And while we're teaching pranayama, then after they practice the asana and pranayama for another 6 months, then we teach them how to teach pranayama, and like that with all the meditation, and also the inner tantric techniques are part of our training program.
What did you just say? The what tantric techniques?
The inner tantric techniques. That's a whole other discussion, obviously.
A whole other discussion. I think it is absolutely clear that the Viniyoga teaching to not just students, but to teachers who teach students is very deep, very interpersonalized, very much about the interstitial space, not least because, as I heard you say, it's about listening to the sound of your breath and, and feeling the movements of your spine. right?
That the movement occurs through the medium of the breath. I give the image of swimming in a river and going with the current, or listening to music and actually dancing with the music. The breath is the current or the music, and the movement is swimming with it.
The movement
it's a powerful tool, by the way, for neuromuscular re-education.
Neuromuscular re-education. That is so amazing.
Let me add one more word.
Okay.
Yeah, one more word. It's samskara.
Yeah.
So the teaching is that we have conditioning from the past, whether it's past lives or not. Right. And that conditioning is structural. That's dysfunctional movement patterns that create repetitive stress injury. Yeah. We have dysfunctional patterns with our breath, with our diet, with our emotion.
Yeah.
So the purpose of yoga, one of the purposes, a way of thinking about it, is to surface, bring your samskaras into a conscious level so you can become free of them. So in asana, if you're not self-conscious of your own movement patterns, all of your asana is going to reinforce them.
Totally.
So we need to be able to become self-conscious of our movement patterns to do the neuromuscular re-education.
Yeah.
And breath in asana gives us an ability, when the breath is conscious and the movement is flowing through the breath, the movements become conscious. So it's a potent tool for neuromuscular re-education.
This is amazing. This is like 7 hours of content in 1 hour, Gary. You pack a punch, I have to say. But so listen, we're a minute at the top of the hour. And I just want to say, everybody, thank you so much for staying. We're probably going to stay for a few more minutes to answer a few more questions. We did start a few minutes after 2 o'clock. I just want to answer like a couple of things. But number one, please, email me, Kim@weekswell.com, weeks.well on Instagram, email American Viniyoga Institute, Yoga Alliance if you want to know more. We love doing this. Obviously, you can how passionate and deep the intelligence of Gary, talking to us. So if you want to know more for Lineages, next month is Pritpal Kaur Khalsa, who is the head of the Kundalini lineage, and will be talking to me in 3 weeks. Actually, she's the 3rd week of August, and it's on the schedule. Please go check it out. I guess one last thing I was going to say or ask you, Gary, is to say, everybody, please go back to this last little bit, because the way you just described it was beautiful, because all of those things you just said, it seems to me, at least for you, is you're really thinking about that, what did you say? Union of the heart and mind. I can't remember if it was before the call. Is that what you said?
I teach. I have been teaching for a decade retreat called Heart Mind, where you unify your thoughts and your feelings, and
that's beautiful. So basically that's beautiful. So why don't we go like a couple more minutes? They're just mostly comments, Gary. Is that okay with you? And
I'm honored and happy to be with you.
Yeah,
all. And thank you, Kim, for this.
Oh, thank you
so
much.
Thank you, Yoga Alliance, also for this opportunity.
Yes, thank you so much to Yoga Alliance, and thank you so much to you, Gary, and Robin as well, and Trisha. I guess I'll just ask one last question, because it is about COVID-19, and there weren't many more upvoted things. Again, as Trisha did say, to those of you still on the call, we will all get your questions, and so feel free to email us directly, but we'll get them too and be able to get back to you and hopefully continue the dialogue. But somebody asked, how do you think we can strengthen ourselves and clients with the barrage of COVID-19 and now the enlarging Delta variant effect alongside the drama of our weather issues? We are all so weary. So I'll just, that's a sad place to end, but an important one, because everything this person is asking is.
It's a powerful question, and it's a powerful reality that, and really, as far as I know, for the first time in history, that the whole planet is experiencing together.
Totally.
And so I want to say a couple of things. Number one, the power of the breath to strengthen not only respiratory function, and we have seen that specific pranayamas are very useful for helping people when they're suffering from COVID, actually. Mm-hmm. So the power of the breath, not only to strengthen respiratory function, because this largely becomes a respiratory crisis for people when they're hospitalized, but also the power of the breath to stimulate balanced metabolic functioning and be supportive of the immune system. It's only a piece of a bigger pie, with your diet and supplements and making sure that your nutrients and so forth. So the power of the breath. The other thing is the ability to influence the autonomic nervous system, because we already experience stress, but this has put us over the top. So the understanding of how to regulate sympathetic, parasympathetic function in order to sedate an hyperactive autonomic nervous system, and also how, when we get fatigue, how to, in a balanced way, nourish our system so we have more energy, and then how to deal with our fear and our judgment of others. Because not only is there fear of our own illnesses, our frustration because we can't get out and do the things we used to do.
Yeah.
And then we can get out and then we're careless because we've been suppressed so long that we can be more exposed to delta. So it really is creating what we call samadhana, a balanced mental perspective, including compassion and tolerance for those who, for various unknown reasons, sometimes real and valid reasons, can't or don't want to do vaccinations. You know, full disclosure, I'm vaccinated, but there are those who don't, and we shouldn't be judging others. We need to, it's a mess, as I know, so as you all know. And so the yoga sadhana to create a balanced mental perspective, increase our courage, be able to regulate our autonomic nervous system, strengthen our respiratory function. It's a great offering from yoga to this current time.
Totally. Yeah. And I know, it's just amazing because, again, we could go to the 304. Pardon me, Eastern. I know it's not your time. I'm sorry, Gary, but that was another beautiful clip that I hope Yoga Alliance sends out back into the world. I really do believe I've seen this for over a year working with Satbir on the scientific research on yoga. For anybody's interested, I know there's some people who are here because of, some of my interactions with you over the last year. But there are so many nuggets that I think people can take in and really walk away with. So I appreciate that perspective on such a large and troubling and global and universal issue that we're going through in COVID-19. So there's a question that is really after my own heart and certainly speaks to my thinking behind this lineage. And Gary, what you and I talked about in our wonderful prep call last month. When did we talk? I don't know. I don't know. I think it was 2 months. But is it fair to say, in your opinion, that lineage crossover in teaching is almost inevitable when exposed to various lineages? And is it all right? Is it acceptable?
Yes. Look, thank you for that question. First of all, human culture is what one of my great teachers, Raimundo Panikkar, and that's another discussion, used to say, it's cross-cultural mutual fecundation. He wrote
Will
books
you say that again? I'm sorry. I'm doing it selfishly because we're after. I'd say that again.
Cross-cultural mutual fecundation, which means enrichment.
Yeah.
So that's the reality of our history. But here's a caution. Understand a tradition deeply through your own study and practice, and hopefully receiving it from an authentic transmitter of the tradition. See each one on their own merits, understand them deeply. Don't just be superficial and say, oh, let's assume it all means the same thing. Totally. But then, of course, my study of yoga has been enriched by my study of Shaivite Siddhanta, and I was 20 years on the board of directors of a Tibetan Buddhist society. So my study of yoga has been enriched by my deep study and practice of Tibetan Buddhism and Shaivite Siddhanta. Not only that, but my study of Western religions has informed my understanding of yoga. But when I teach yoga, I'm teaching the authentic tradition I received from Krishnamacharya, but informed and enriched by these other traditions. So be careful about mixing up. Only share what you understand deeply. And for the rest, say you're a journalist. I'll say, I've initiated to train teachers and teach Viniyoga. I'm not initiated to teach Tibetan Buddhism. Yeah. So I'll share something that I heard. As some of the great writers, disciples of Buddha said, thus I have heard. I'm not pretending to be an authority. So make sure that you are teaching what you understand, and don't mix things up just because it looks sweet or cute. Really make sure you understand what you're teaching. Totally.
I think that honestly that's the drop the mic moment. There's so many great questions, but we are, 8 minutes past the hour. And I think that I don't know if you feel this way, but, I've studied in a variety of, deeply studied. I became a teacher in the integral yoga tradition and then did a lot of, study in between then and becoming an Iyengar teacher. And there's no way that the integral yoga tradition does not influence my Iyengar teaching, but I am devoted to my two Iyengar teachers, one, and that, and when I teach that class, I'm teaching that class, but it's so clear, but at the same time, what you said. Also,
it's as long as you stay in integrity with the teaching you've received, with yourself and with your students, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly.
Those three things, let me just repeat that because I think it's so important. Yes. Stay in integrity with the lineage. So I even have chants, that connect me to my teacher and my teacher's teacher. The lineage is alive in me. Yes. And I honor, revere, connect to that. But I've been practicing for 40 years. So I've learned things that are relevant to me and my culture that maybe my teacher didn't know. Right. So I respect not only the lineage, but my own experience. And then I learned so much from all the people that I work with. So my focus is on them. So I respect them, my own experience and what I've received. And it's informed by the other traditions that I've been exposed to and studied. So as long as you stay in integrity with yourself and don't pretend, teach what you know, and share from your heart and with your own passion, how yoga served you, you share from that passion yourself. And then your teaching will evolve as your practice deepens, as your own experience deepens.
Totally. And you're always in it. It's always a present experience. And when a yoga teacher, there's, at least that's the call.
Either it is or it isn't.
It is.
So that's the challenge for the yoga teacher.
Exactly. Either it is or it isn't. Totally. Gary, you're the best. I am so
honored. Thank you.
This hour plus with you. I'm so delighted to have that. So many people have hung on the call too, which has been beautiful. We really hope we see you tomorrow with Bernadette Solar. Gary, I'll see you tomorrow.
I look forward to it, Kim. Have a really wonderful afternoon and be well, everybody. I wish you a safe, pleasant journey from birth to end of life.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Bye. We'll see you tomorrow.